The backlash to the entirety of the progressive era has started, and with it, we can see the nature of right-wing politics once again fully swinging into fruition. And why is this? It's because, much like anything in life, moderation is key, and the left has completely misunderstood this. And with it, left-wing culture completely overtaking everything from the nature of art, culture, and politics being disseminated into absolutely everything of modern-day life. Well, what do we see? We see that you've infected every single thing that people used as escapism, and because of it, they were just like, no, I'm sick and tired of you. You know what? I've absolutely had enough. And due to the nature of progressivism and progressive politics being nothing more than the ethos of growth for the sake of growth, what do we see? We see that while it may have been well intentioned based on the starting of around 1890 when we started the progressive era, and with it, it was supposed to be based on the fact that people weren't judged around arbitrary characteristics, well, it's come to the nature of growth for the sake of growth has become nothing more than a cancer on society. And why is that? It's because growth for the sake of growth is specifically the ethos of cancer. Cancer simply grows and it grows and it grows until it kills the host. And that is a perfect analogy in how we will be jumping into this. And what we see is the right wing is apparently taking over governments not only in South America, but in Europe. We already had Donald Trump in the United States activating that of the America First conservative right. And what happened? Many people within the corporate press freaked out and they lost their minds and they were talking about the fact of Donald Trump is this big issue. Well, what did they think? They thought Donald Trump was the thing that activated these people. And as Michael Malice says, they were so wrong because Trump wasn't the river, he was the dam. He was simply the bulwark. And with it, after you've attacked him and you've pierced him, what you've done is broken the structural housing of the dam, and there is no stopping this flood. Now let's go ahead and jump into it. We see that the Netherlands has now been overtaken by a right-wing government, and with it, it appears that the backlash due to the nature of immigration that has completely flooded many of these countries with a mass influx of migrants has finally hit the tipping point, and with it, we can see that the backlash is hitting critical mass. What do we see here is him celebrating. And he's excited, obviously, as you would expect. And what we see is this man is being called the Trump of Netherlands, and which I find so interesting because it's always the Argentinian Trump, Trump of the Netherlands. It's always these ridiculous things. Oh, well, Giorgia Meloni from Italy is just the female Donald Trump. It's like, why is it that you can't actually make any other correlation? Oh, it's because you have to tar and feather these people with the brush of Trumpism because they're right wing, which means they have to be Donald Trump. Because Donald Trump has been the bad guy with the corporate press for so long, and they've painted him as such. And with it, they're able to paint these people as exactly that. Now, what do we see? From Rita Panahi, and she is someone who is absolutely fantastic. She works for Sky News. She's one of the best people that they've got. From Italy to Sweden, Finland to stalwart Hungary, and now the Netherlands, the right is winning across much of Europe. And that's absolutely true, and it's not the only place they're winning. We see that they've also taken over now in Argentina with Javier Milei, the anarcho-capitalist libertarian, now winning the election, and with it, we can see that the tide is finally turning. From Rebel News, Wilder's campaign called for a referendum on the Netherlands' participation in the European Union, a halt to accepting asylum seekers, and rejecting migrants. Zero Hedge said if only Argentina and the Netherlands had perfected mail-in ballots, none of this would have ever happened. And that's absolutely true. If only they would have perfected mail-in ballots like Brazil and the United States, then they would have never had to worry about these dangerous far-right lunatics. And what do we see? Here from End Wokeness, this man is on track to become the next PM of the Netherlands after his landslide today, which he now is. Garrett Wilders is not afraid to call out the dangers of mass immigration and multiculturalism. Listen to him here, he gives it zero fucks.
Moroccans are overrepresented enormously in the Dutch crime statistics. More than 60% of the Moroccan youth under the age of 23 has been arrested by the Dutch police. They are in general, when it comes to violent street crimes, 20 times more often being arrested on many crimes.
But if a given society has a problem with members of one particular group, is it wise for a politician to ostracize the whole group?
Well, no, you know, it's wise to tell the truth. I did not invent that people from Morocco are overrepresented in the statistics.
Is that high rate of crime because these people are Moroccan, or is that also because they are unemployed?
I'm not a psychologist or sociologist. I don't care why people are criminals.
So, he finishes by saying, I don't care why people are criminals. I care that they're criminals. Which, you should care about the nature of what drives people to be criminals, because otherwise you avoid understanding the historical context from the policies that may have been implemented that could have caused these problems, that could lead you out of these issues that you see these people suffering, so that future criminals are not created by the bad policies and we can take them away. That way they're not implemented and ruining people's lives. This is something where, while these people may be good on some issues, they're still bad on so many others, and they fail to see things from the nuanced perspective that is needed. From Nuance Bro, Argentinian right wing, Netherlands right wing, they all just happen to be very pro-Israel and had their flags everywhere as they celebrate their video. Fascinating. Which is a fantastic point and something for people to keep in mind. Is it the fact that these people are winning because they are getting backed by that of the Zionist right, and with it, that is why they're being allowed to be goose-stepping into power? Or is it the nature of this is simply just the ideals with which they support? And here we see Ryan Dawson beneath this. It says, one day people are going to realize all the things I've been saying about Israel are correct. And the reason he's saying this is because he is a very vocal critic of Israel. Now we go into Sadiq Khan. A reminder to progressives everywhere, the continued threat of the far right is real and on our doorstep. Next year is going to be pivotal for standing up and defending our values in London, in Europe, and across the world. Well, what do we see? We see that once again, the right wins any bit of power back, which the left has been consistently taking so much ground for so long. And because the left is so conditioned to winning, immediately when they lose any bit of ground whatsoever, it's a major blow. And one thing that the left, even though this is a major blow, they don't realize why these are such huge blows. Because when you're toying with the right, you're toying with people that play for keeps and play the long game, which is something that many within the progressive mindset completely misunderstand, because they are so in tune with playing that of the game of the now. And you can see this based on the fact of the rhetoric that they use, because if you fail to use the proper rhetoric within the progressive ethos, and let's say you're having conversations with people within this mindset and within that culture, if you're not up to date on the perfect jargon and the rhetoric and wordplay you're supposed to be using, well, it's very easy to say who's in and who's out and who's not hip with the current thing. And that is a great thing that they use to ostracize people from the field of debate when it comes to the nature of using the purity spiral to excommunicate those who are, let's say, not within every single bubble that the progressive mindset demands you be in when it comes to the nature of purely subscribing to the ethos of what it means to be a progressive. All right. Now we move on, and what does Sadiq Khan say? The reminder to progressives everywhere. Well, what does Carl Benjamin have to say in response? Carl Benjamin, being founder of the Lotus Eaters podcast, and Lotus Eaters being fantastic, I cannot recommend him enough. Former Sargon of Akkad YouTube account creator, and man, Sargon was great. He used to put out so many wonderful pieces of content, and this was throughout like the entirety of the Gamergate era, but nonetheless, what did he say? An Algerian immigrant stabbed children today, Sadiq. So, a child was stabbed, and all Sadiq Khan has to say is, well, we have to make sure we're worrying about this because the far right is encroaching. Well, they don't ever want to address the nature of what happens because of immigration, which are the policies they actually advocate for. What do? They sit there and they say, no, we have to worry about the dangers of the far right. But people like Sargon of Akkad, aka Carl Benjamin, and many people who end up working for people like him, or those who are voting for people like Garrett Wilders in the Netherlands, that see these things that are happening, like this stabbing of children in Ireland, and they're like, wow, this is a major issue. The fact that you're not addressing this is a huge problem, and you're only advocating for the people that are committing these crimes to be brought into the country en masse even more than they already are. And what do we see? We go on to Jeff Deist, and Jeff Deist is fantastic. If you're unfamiliar, he's a former Mises Institute grad, and he was former head of the Mises Institute. He's wonderful. He's an economist. I cannot recommend him enough. Here we see, democracy means when your team loses, it's necessarily due to an extremist threat. No other explanation is possible. What should be done to the extremist far-right Londoners? Loss of voting franchise? Re-education programs? Removal for employment? Surely an extremist threat must be removed, and we saw the nature of how they wanted to handle an extremist threat in Canada when we had the trucker protest, and Justin Trudeau, if he had not gotten so much pressure from people online and other people within Canada, he would have gladly used every single force of power that the government could have given him to crack down on every single person who supported the trucker protest. He would have debanked you, he would have had you fired from your jobs, he would have had you poor and destitute and suffering through the Canadian winter with no ability to pay for it. Alrighty, now what do we see? Disclosed TV has footage, and this is in Ireland after the child was stabbed. It says multiple children stabbed near a school in Dublin. So, This has activated riots. And this has activated people who are absolutely sick of it. And with this mass wave of politicians being elected from that of the right-leaning perspective, what we see is that people are now realizing they're not alone. And many of the times the silent majority is the one who wields the most power. And it's the vocal minority who usually ends up screeching the loudest about the specific things. And with it, once the silent majority is activated, like I've said, you are playing with the people who play for keeps, and that is exactly what the silent majority is, and there is no turning back from that. Now here we can see people are losing their minds. So people are angry, and they're wanting people out of their country specifically because they're talking about the fact that immigration has led to such a spike in the crime rate. Now we go into Disclosed TV again. Anger erupts in Dublin after knife attack on children. And here's the deal. What causes this mass immigration influx? Well, one of the major things that caused this was the destabilization of the Middle East. And who's responsible for that? Well, it's the world empire. It's the United States, and us funding paramilitary juntas and establishing top-down and bottom-up regime changes across the entirety of the Middle East and Latin America, destabilizing these places to degrees that are unfathomable when it comes to the nature of living in the Western world. You could not understand the degree with which these people suffer if you were to actually live through it for a week, because you wouldn't understand the long-term pain with which how this scars your psyche and destroys your ability to truly orient yourself through the world as a happy person. But what do we see? We see now we have a massive migration crisis, whether it be through the southern border in the United States or whether it be all throughout Europe from the destabilization of the Middle East. And it's created the cause of Brexit, which was British exit from the entirety of the system of what was going on with the EU. And now what do we see? We see the fact that there are people activating across the world against mass immigration, and with it, the one thing that I am so concerned about is the fact that many people will misunderstand the nature of what caused these things, and that will only lead to further crisis down the line that will be related to this. But here's the deal. We won't even know what those crises will be, because you cannot project that far down the line when you are dealing with, I would argue, a spastic timeline that realistically has no nature to be charted, because we are in or it has no ability to be charted because we are in uncharted territory. And here's why we're in uncharted territory. Because we haven't seen anything like this before when it comes to the nature of having the capacity for widespread information. We haven't seen the ability for political mobilization en masse to this degree. And with it, not only is it going to be people seeing this happening within their localities, they're going to be seeing it happening en masse across the globe. And that's only going to be adding further fuel to the fire. And I wonder to the nature with which how this will drive divisions across the world. That's all I've got for this. I'm going to go ahead and leave it there. Thank you for watching if you got this far. Thumbs up if you liked it. Thumbs down if you didn't. Tell me where I'm wrong in the comment section down below. I'm sure there's some things that people think I'm wrong about, which is perfectly understandable. I will gladly take any critiques you can give me. If you can give me anything to read that counters my bias, I will gladly go through it, but you got to actually provide it. Thank you for watching. Stay lovely, stay great. Tell someone you love them. Thank you for watching. Peace out.